Welcome to our 2024 New York Seafood Summit event in Geneva. This is the third of our 3 events in the Seafood Summit series this year. I want to start off with just a little bit of housekeeping. This event is being recorded. We have our owl up here that is recording the event 180 degrees, so everybody in the audience can be seen, as well as our speakers up here in the front of the room. The event is also being recorded, right, so that we can offer this to all other participants or registrants, as well as those across the state who are interested in learning more about the discussions and the presentations that we have here at our Geneva Summit today. My name is Mike Saramella. I'm a Seafood Safety and Technology Specialist with New York Sea Grant. New York Sea Grant is a multi-partner organization that is run through the SUNY system and Cornell University. And we provide extension, education, and outreach, programming opportunities, development of resources and tools for our coastal communities in support of those communities and our coastal economies. As the seafood specialist, I work largely in the post-harvest sector of the industry, working with processors, producers, retailers, distributors, wholesalers, and those interested in marketing direct to whether that's the fishermen or farmers. I work a lot with seafood safety, providing seafood HACCP and food safety training to our industry participants, as well as guidance on processing technology and nutrition, quality, and marketing, as well as nutrition. Today, we are here to talk about the industry that's up here in New York State and the resources that are available to the industry across the state. At our past our events, our first was in Riverhead on February 27th. That was largely focused on our commercial fisheries, but also our marine aquaculture industries. So our oyster aquaculture is a big industry here in New York. We had over 80 participants, 20 elected officials, all participate in that event, have very good discussions around the challenges of our industry. And I think a lot of those challenges resonate not only with our wild capture fisheries, but with industry across the state, some of them being regulations, lack of support in terms of funding and infrastructure for processing, right? And so there's a lot of similar synergies between the challenges of our upstate industries, our land-based aquaculture industries, and our wild capture and marine industries, right? Which is great to learn because we can work together to address those challenges. We then had our second event at Hyde Park at the Culinary Institute of America. That event was a little more focused on our culinary sector, like engaging those chefs and future chefs on the topic of seafood, especially local seafood. What are we producing right here in New York? For that event, we brought up our first and only commercially licensed kelp farmer in New York. So we have an emerging industry of seaweed being brought to the table. We've been working closely with that industry to support them. That farmer came up to speak a little bit about their operation and work that they do. We also had a chef talk about culinary applications. We had a panel of speakers look at the access and opportunities and the challenges related to accessing our local products. Some of the speakers here today, Steve with New Phonics. So I encourage you throughout the day as we have opportunities to network, talk to the other participants, and learn a little bit from the various sectors of the industry that you have represented here today. I do want to take a minute to thank our sponsors for this year's event. Cornell AgriTech Center for Sustainability has sponsored all 3 of our summit activities, which allow us to offer these across the state free of charge with the opportunity to taste a variety of our New York seafood offerings. I want to take a moment also to introduce our summit team. So it takes a team to plan and execute these events, especially 3 events across 3 regions of the state. In addition to myself, we have Barry Nelson. He's our aquaculture specialist with New York Sea Grant, joined the team 2 years ago, hit the ground running, helping us with a lot of the crazy logistics of getting locally farmed and fished seafood from all across the state to the various locations for our event, and with logistics of lining up speakers and getting everybody here and there. We have 3 colleagues from Cornell Cooperative Extension of Suffolk County that joined the team a couple of years ago, who really helped us with this expanding our reach and bringing the event to different regions of the state. They're largely involved in the coordination of our Riverhead event and engaging the fishermen to make sure we have a good fishing presence and a wild capture presence there. That's Kristen Gervino, Scott Killer Wageman, and Tara McClintock, all 3 with CCE. We also had this year our contact at the Culinary Institute of America, Bruce Mattel, former dean at the CIA, now retiree, so has a little more time in his hands and actually joined the planning team. So it's been really crucial in maintaining that relationship with the Culinary Institute to have that event really focused on culinary applications. And as you can imagine, the preparations and the food we get there is quite spectacular. So if you ever get an opportunity to come down to the CIA to experience the summit, and get a taste of a much broader variety of what we have locally. All right, so as far as our program for today, so I almost forgot one person, Stephen Fertini, Dr. Stephen Fertini. He is with the Center for Aquatic Animal Research and Management. He actually helped with founding the summit back in 2016. We were sitting around having discussions around how we can better engage the industry across the state, create opportunities for the industry to learn from one another, network, and collaborate. And that is how the summit was born. It started as a single event in Manhattan, sitting around a board table, just having discussions on the challenges, and now has expanded to the 3 events in 3 regions that we're maintaining here today. As far as today's program, we'll start off with a welcome from Senator Hudson. We have Dan here as a representative to read a letter. We've got a speaker for our industry spotlight. So Brittany Peachy with Hudson Valley Fish Farms. You'll get to hear about one of our large-scale recirculating aquaculture facilities that operate here in upstate New York, as well as their venture into vertically integrating and doing in-house processing and marketing direct. We then have Dr. David Lodge joining us from the Atkinson Center for Sustainability, who's going to talk about some novel technologies and applications of eDNA in aquaculture and some of the opportunities that exist there. Before we transition into kind of an opportunities and resources panel, and through that we will have myself. I will be sharing some of the variety of resources that we've developed over the years with CNET that are in place to help support the industry, whether that be through regulatory compliance, understanding regulations, nutrition, safety, marketing, quality. Many of those are in the back, and I'll talk a little bit more about them later. We've got Olga Padilla-Zakor. Dr. Olga Padilla-Zakor is going to be introducing the Food Venture Center, and various resources that they have for food entrepreneurs and development of value-added processing and new businesses in New York State, as well as expansion of existing businesses. We've got a representative from USDA ELAP program here. Jamie is going to talk a little bit about the opportunities and the resources that they provide and can provide for aquaculture producers in New York State. And then in Geneva, we have Emily from the New York State Department of Agriculture and Markets to share some grant and opportunities with everybody. Great opportunities. There's been a lot of talk, and one of the big challenges I mentioned earlier, infrastructure, support funding to expand and diversify business. There are finally opportunities for that coming through the New York State Department of Agriculture and Markets that Emily is going to share with us today. Then we'll kind of wrap up in here. We'll wrap up for our virtual participants, and then we'll move on to our tour of the Food Venture Center. And Olga is going to take us across the street to the Food Venture Center pilot plant, so you get to see all the facilities there, the various equipment that they have available to support the industry in their endeavors. So with that, I'd like to one more note in terms of housekeeping, because this is a virtual event, and we do have participants online. We do ask that try to keep it down so that there's not too much background noise. If you have questions, we'll come around with a mic so we can make sure that our virtual participants can hear them as well. For our virtual participants, if you please keep your audio muted until or unless you have a question, feel free to use that chat box that is monitored. All right, so with that, I would like to ask Dan Bukowski to come on up. Senator Hellman unfortunately could not be here with us today, but she did send in with a letter and read that for us. Thank you, Dan.
So good afternoon, everybody. My name is Dan Bukowski. I have the privilege of serving as Senator Hellman's Operations Director. Senator Hellman represents all of Ontario, Wayne, Livingston, and parts of Monroe County. Unfortunately, the senator couldn't be here as she is in Albany during the legislative session, but she did want me to come to speak on her behalf and share a letter with you all to open up the summit. So, to my friends in attendance of the 8th Annual Upstate New York Seafood Summit, while I regret to Well, I regret to inform you that I am unfortunately unable to attend today due to the legislative session in Albany. I wanted to welcome you all to this world-class asset we have right here in the 54th Senate District and in the Finger Lakes region. AgriTech, Cornell AgriTech. As its representative in the state Senate and as a member of Cornell AgriTech's advisory council, I can assure you that there is no better place to convene for discussions about fostering new opportunities for the collaboration and growth of the seafood industry than right here at Cornell AgriTech. The Finger Lakes region has become synonymous with agriculture, with food, with wine and craft beverages, and more importantly, with innovative producers bringing new products to market right here in the Finger Lakes. These entrepreneurs have a true partner in Cornell Food Venture Center and the Center for Excellence for Food and Agriculture at Cornell AgriTech. I look forward to learning more from all of you about the outcomes of today's conversations as we work together to find new ways to both support agriculture and aquaculture, but also to protect our farmlands and our waterways. I wish you all the very best on yet another successful summit and hope to be able to join you all next year. With warmest regards, Senator Pamela Helming, Senator of the 54th Senate District. Thank you all so much.
Thank you, Dan and Senator Helming. We hope to see you next year. All right, and we're gonna jump into our first speaker for today, and that is our industry spotlight. All right, so we're gonna invite Brittany Peachy up. She's going to be talking about Hudson Valley Fisheries and their large-scale commercial operation in Hudson, New York.
Hey, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for the introduction, Michael, and thank you for the invitation to speak today about Hudson Valley Fisheries. Yeah, it's an honor to be here. So who are we? We're a family-owned freshwater recirculating aquaculture system, and we are in Hudson, New York. Hudson Valley was chosen as a strategic location because of its proximity to a lot of major Northeast markets. So as you can see here, New York City, Boston, Philadelphia, and Washington, D.C. In case you needed a visual of where Hudson is, so we're about 45 minutes south of Albany, about 2 hours north of New York City, and again, you can see Boston on that map as well. So what I'm going to try to do today is give you a very broad, not very detailed overview of what we're doing. So that we don't have to stay here for several hours. So we're growing steelhead trout, also known as rainbow trout, Oncorhynchus micus. We're getting all female diploid eyed eggs from Trout Lodge and Riverence, which are certified specific disease-free egg suppliers, primarily in the western U.S. So Washington State, Idaho. We're doing a swim up fry. So first feeding fry to our harvest weight, 2.5 kilos between 15 and 16 months. We're using a custom Hudson Valley diet. So our grow out fish get a diet that has specific constraints based on what our customers have asked for, which includes no GMOs. And then of course we don't use antibiotics, no added hormones, that sort of thing as well. So to start with our first step. So as I mentioned, we get those certified specific disease-free eggs in from our suppliers. Even with that certification of being disease-free, we still disinfect them as we get them. And so then they are put into our incubation system, which is what you're looking at here. So this is called a heat stack system. The eggs are in the tray there, and they don't like bright lights, so that's why you see that red light there. So starting with these incubation systems, this also acts as another quarantine step. The incubation system is separate from our nursery system, which is separate from our production system. As we've already mentioned several times, biosecurity is extremely important to our farm. So we want to make sure that as bringing these eggs in and as we are growing the fish through each stage, we want to make sure that we are keeping everything contained in a way that if there is a problem, if we see disease start to rise in these eggs, we want to make sure that none of the other systems are going to get affected. So once they're hatched, so they hatch in these trays, once they're hatched and they've consumed almost all of their yolk sac, then we will transfer them to our first feeding tanks. So I had to include this video here just because, this is one of my favorite stages. I think they're just so cute with the size. So this is where they'll learn to eat. They will put these in these very shallow, tanks. So they'll learn to swim to the top, get the pelletizer feed. Sorry?
How big are they? Can you just give us an?
Oh, when they're this size, they're put in these tanks at maybe an inch or less. And we'll grow them up to around a gram, which is a little bit more than that. And from that gram size, then they'll be transferred into our deeper nursery, system tanks. So in the nursery system, we'll grow them to around, 35 grams average weight. And from there, then they'll move to the production systems. And once again, the nursery system is kept separate from the production system, as well as the staff. So the nursery has its own dedicated staff, and they're, specifically trained to deal with these early life stages. And the fish are hand-fed during this time as well. So they get a really good feel for how the fish are feeding, how they're reacting to the environment. So they can keep a really good eye on how the fish are growing. So this is also a video. I'm gonna apologize right off the bat because the focus kind of goes in and out. It does focus eventually, but so this is one of our grow out tanks, one of our production tanks here. And so you can see the fish once it focuses, the fish eating here. So this is one of the great things about growing trout, is that they're so excited to eat. So it makes trout are really exciting fish to grow. Because one of the best things about them is their reaction to food. So after the nursery, again, fish are moved up onto the production floor, and then as they grow, they'll be transferred to different size tanks to make sure that they have enough room to continue growing. And so as you can see, that is an automatic feeder that is feeding the tanks up here. So although the tanks are automatically fed and it's programmed, we do have technicians that are watching over that at least twice a day to make sure the fish are reacting in the way that we want them to, so they're not overfed, they're not underfed. Yeah, and then so our biggest tanks in the production area that they will end up being in are 45 feet diameter, and between 10 and 13 feet deep. So at Hudson Valley Fisheries, we focus on the details. Because we're a circulating aquaculture system, we have to run the systems themselves very tight. So some of those details include a SCADA system, and SCADA stands for Supervisory Control and Data Acquisition. And essentially what that means is we have sensors and probes on everything, and they're all hooked to alarms. So if a level of a tank gets too high at 3 a.m., somebody knows about it and they can respond, so that we're not dealing with the problem later when it's actually life-threatening to the fish. We can deal with the problem beforehand. So that also includes climate controls for air and also for water, automated feeding, as you saw, gentle fish movements. So we're moving our fish with fish pumps, not, netting and throwing or things like that. Meticulous cleaning throughout the entire life cycle. Regular fish health and welfare screenings, daily water quality analysis, and strict biosecurity protocols, as I mentioned earlier as well. So that's just an example of a control screen that we would have for our SCADA system. Now our effluent treatment. So obviously we grow fish, so we use water. And we are a circulating aquaculture system. As I said, we still have an outlet pipe. So what do we do with that? The solids filtration, I'll talk about a little bit more in the next slide, but the solids from the tanks are separated in the system. And so beyond that, then the water effluent will go to a clarifier, a second drum filter, and drum filters again are getting solids out. So that would be big solids to an anox tank, to a membrane bioreactor, and then from then to reverse osmosis, which can be used by plants in the greenhouses that we have on site, or if it's not used by the plants, it's discharged. But again, this membrane bioreactor, it's a wastewater treatment plant, and so we're getting our water back to really clean clean, it's, safe to discharge, and it's really good, high quality water. We've thought about in the past, and I guess we're still considering, cleaning it up further and bringing it back, but that's to be continued. So let's talk about the solids a little bit then. So solids, again, we're producing fish. What do fish do? They poop. So fecal waste, uneaten feed if there is any, fish mortality, and then offal or guts from the processing. That is taken and separated, and then that'll be used by a composting company to produce topsoil that they will end up selling. So it's not wasted. Nothing is waste, and I really like to keep that idea in mind as we produce the fish or these other streams of really nutrients. The fecal waste is full of nitrogen and phosphorus, of course, which can be used by plants as long as it's transformed properly. So our staff. As you can see here, we've grown over time. We started with the farm, right? And that's primarily where I'm focused. So on the farm, there's the left side there, the personnel that we have. But then we also have a processing plant, which I'll talk a little bit more on as well, which has 19 personnel. 4 main office staff to support in administrative and logistics. And then we have 3 sales and marketing plus the farmers market staff as well. And yeah, one of the great things about working at Hudson Valley Fisheries is our team. It's a lot of passionate people producing fish and making sure that we're continuing to improve. And so how do we do that constant improvements? Through training programs, through research projects on the farm, and through open communication. So we have a lot of hands-on experts at Hudson Valley Fisheries. All right, so let's start talking about how we move those fish from the tanks to the plates. So harvesting. Once the fish are at their target size, they'll be moved into one of our purge tanks, which is what you see here. And the purge tanks are there to make sure the fish tastes good, and then their guts are clear of feces. So we harvest once per week, and essentially what happens is the fish will be seined or netted towards that big PVC pipe on the side of the tank there. And then the fish are pumped through to our electrostunning system. So again, fish are kept in water the entire time, which reduces the stress. This is something I'm actually really proud of, is our method of harvesting, which is the gold standard electrostunning. So we're keeping the fish in the water, so they have oxygen, they have, they're in water still, they're not panicking. And then they'll go from that straight to our electrostunner, which causes the fish to lose consciousness rapidly. And whether you believe fish are conscious or not, they lose sensation. And so then when they are dispatched, they're not flopping around, they're not panicking. It's safer for the fish, it's safer for the people that are doing, that are cutting the gills. And so that's our system there. There's no photos of that, so if you're squeamish, don't worry. So the gills are cut, the fish bleeds out, and we keep them in an ice tote, essentially cold oxygenated water, to make sure that they are bleeding out is what's killing them, not suffocating. That's really important for us. For both welfare considerations as well as product quality. So let's start talking about processing then. So one thing I'll explain is I'll talk about hogfish, and what I mean by hog is head on gutted. And the reason I wanted to explain that is because when I started at Hudson Valley Fisheries, not knowing anything about processing, is I was hearing hogfish, and we're not growing hogfish, why do I keep saying that? But it just means head on gutted. So any fish that's head on, but is also gutted, is a hogfish. So once our fish are harvested, they'll be brought in the totes over to the processing plant, which is what you see here, dumped into this container, and then this container will conveyor the fish up to another conveyor. So the pocket conveyor here, they are gutting the fish will be laid upside down in these pockets, and then there'll probably be between 5 and 6 people on that line. That'll either be cutting the fish open, pulling the guts out, or sucking the kidney out. So once that happens and the fish continue down the line, they will then be sorted by a trained technician into different size and quality categories. And so then from there, where the fish goes depends on the customers that we have and what the customers want. So certain customers will take hogfish, others want fillets, and so that will determine then where those fish go. So this is the fillet machine that we have. So the fish that are going to be filleted will be headed and then sent through the machine. Once that happens, the fillets themselves will be trimmed down to a D-trim. And after that, the pin bones removed by machine as well. And I'll say that this is not 100% accurate. There still are a few pin bones there, but afterwards, there are a couple of people also just making sure that the rest of them are out. So that our customers don't have to deal with that. If somebody wants portions, then we also have a portioning machine. So the portioning machine will scan the individual fillets and then cut them according to the size that is required. We also have IQF, or individually quick frozen. We have a tunnel freezer here that uses liquid nitrogen to quickly freeze those products if the customer desires. So we have full traceability through this entire process. And that was one reason why we went for best aquaculture practices, is in one of their big emphases, I guess you would say, is traceability. So again, having the ability to go from this fillet came from this cohort, which came from this tank, that were fed this feed, we know the lot numbers, we know the genetic lines. And so we're the only RAS farm that I know of that is 4-star BAP certified, which is the highest certification you can get in that process. So just to take a look at some of our product forms here. I'd say fresh, ready to cook, but again, because we have so much traceability and control over our system, it is safe to eat raw. So again, fillets, portions, really whatever the customer desires. I mean, I guess I shouldn't say that, and the processing crew will hate that it is, but we are really flexible. We have a lot of options for our potential. But we also have prepared or ready to eat products such as hot smoked, cold smoked. We've done spreads in the past, as well as trout snack bites. We work with companies such as Samaki Smoked Fish or Casco Food Company to produce these ready to eat products. And then we market them under our brand. And I'm really proud to say that both the hot and the cold smoked products are used on Singapore Airlines first and business class cabins as a menu item on their flights from JFK to Singapore. So we'll talk about sales a little bit. Obviously, a lot of things changed during COVID, and I don't have to remind you of that, right? We all know what happened. But during that time, we had to make a lot of pivots, which I'm sure a lot of seafood companies did as well. And one of the things we did was went from primarily wholesale customers to much more direct-to-consumer customers. And so that created sort of through the entire process, we have more of a social media presence now, home delivery options, so you can order online. We have a lot of farmers markets that we go to in New York City and beyond. And then we also have items such as fish kits that we'll sell, grilling kits, make your own grab blocks, holiday meal kits, specialty items. And just recently I developed a dog treat project that I actually, the Food Adventure Center had an online course that I was a part of, which was really great called Food Smart. So thank you for that, which just helped me think through the process. But yeah. So farmers markets actually contribute to about 30% of our revenue coming in. So just to look at the sales breakdown, and this is by income, this is not by volume, but fillets make up about 44% of the value of what we're selling. Then hogfish at 27%, cold smoked And that would be all, we have 3 flavors, cold smoked, so that'd be all of this combined, hot smoked, and then, the other category. And just to point out as well, kind of our sales reach, so we have the dark blue is online and wholesale, sales that we've had in the past 8 years, 9 years. So you can see, obviously, a lot of New England, some around the country as well. But then online, there's a lot of states where that is the only way that people were reaching our fish if they were ordering online and getting it shipped. And this is just an observation that I had that I thought was interesting. I don't know what it means, if it means anything, but that a lot of the wholesale customers that we have are actually areas that have access to fish, which is really interesting. Not necessarily inland that don't have access to a lot of seafood. Again, I don't know if that means anything, but just thought it was interesting to point out. And then we have I'm proud to have relationships with people from the following institutions. It's been great with my time at Hudson Valley Fisheries to connect with people from these institutions and just help to move the farm forward as well as the industry. Agriculture and aquaculture specifically, obviously I'm pretty passionate about, so I relish the opportunity to come here and share the information that I have about the farm with you, and yeah, if there's any questions. Time for questions or no?
Yeah, we'll try to.
What's your website then? What website?
It's HudsonValleyFisheries.com. Sorry, I should put that somewhere.
There's plenty of time for questions if there are any.
Is the facility producing at full capacity, or are you limited by other factors?
We're not producing it. Well, I guess I should say, we're not producing at design capacity, what was promised to be at design capacity. It's been held back by a number of things. One of them was the amount of water that we were able to purchase. And that's a whole nother process, a whole nother issue. But we are starting to get more water, so that's, we're moving forward in that way. But at this time, we're not at the capacity that was the system and the farm was designed.
Other questions?
No, okay. Brittany, yeah, you mentioned that you were producing to specs that your customers wanted, or can you just describe some of those? Maybe what goes into these or antibiotics, that sort of thing. What are the spectrum of consumer requests for you?
So I guess I should say, when we were designing the feed, we were kind of anticipating what would be desired from the people that would be willing to pay more for a recirculating aquaculture system product. Because at this point, we're still a niche product. We're trying to go to that higher end market. And so, no GMOs, we're not using any soy in our diet, no feather meal, things like that. We're just trying to elevate the feed a little bit while still being sustainable. So not a whole lot of fish meal, trying to use more of the sustainable ingredients. So whether you agree with it or not, poultry products and things like that, that I believe we need to find a stream for, and using it to feed fish to produce a higher value product that is a good idea.
And that's the whole point. And so are you able to find premium markets to get a decent margin above what you're paying for those extra costs?
Right, yeah. I guess one thing that is brought up a lot too, and I think there was a story about it recently, I keep hearing questions about it, is astaxanthin. So we're using a natural source of astaxanthin versus a synthetic source. Not that I'm placing judgment on the synthetic, but that seems to be something that's important for customers.
We have an online question from Ian Fry. He's asking what kind of products or species is Hudson Valley planning on expanding?
I'm not sure we would go with another species at this point. The trout seems to be doing pretty well as far as adapting to the type of system because it's not for every type of fish. Yeah, I don't know as far as other types of products. Maybe in the future, we've talked about kind of teased at doing our own smoked line, by ourselves, but again, that's probably years down the road.
You have another question. What is, like, if people wanted to know what farmers markets you were at, is there, like, on the website, is there a list of that, or is there, you guys just go to a specific?
I believe they're all on the website, yeah.
Yeah, looking on the website.
Yeah, they are on the website.
Okay.
Thank you so much for the presentation. That was wonderful. My question is, looking at your website and you can order directly, so your customers are household or restaurants, or do you know the breakdown of your online customers?
Online are probably all households. If the restaurant would order online, our logistics and administrative, individuals would see that and then kind of create more of a corporate account. So most of the online is gonna be households. Individuals.
These smoke products we're talking about, what we have to taste. Any other questions?
Looks like it from the photos. It looked like it from the photos, but is everything inside, nothing outside?
Yes, that's
Okay.
correct. Yep. Yeah, again, it's a biosecurity thing that we don't want any, contamination from birds or predators.
Any other questions? You go for it. You're having on.
Okay, you know me. Just thinking about farms, wastewater is one thing you have to deal with, but then the carcasses and offal are another. And I, of course, see both of these as gold mines, but they're not always exploited to the extent that I think they should be. You did mention some composting with the offal, but is anyone else interested in that at this point?
We've had a few people we've sent samples to, but haven't really heard anything back. But as far as I understand, composting nothing. So,
Got about 5 more minutes. Any other questions?
gonna be positive fast.
When you talk about purchasing water, where do you purchase that from?
We get it from the town. So we're purchasing water that is essentially drinking water, taking the chlorine out and then using it for the fish.
And is that like a type of agreement you have with the town, or it's just that's where you source it from?
Yeah, I mean, it's an agreement as far as, how much water we can take, and that was one of the things that we've increased recently, which is really exciting. But yeah, we purchase it the same as anybody else.
So the limitations would be, you know, if the town's only allocated so much to you,
Right.
and then if there's issues maybe with precipitation received that year, water tables are down, would that impact what you are able to obtain?
I think that the primary, I would assume so. I guess I don't know the details of that specifically. But as I understand it, they were making sure that their wells were able to support more use on our end, which makes sense, right? People have to have water. So yeah, now that they're more confident that that they're not approaching any kind of limit, that's the ability to increase our water use.
Thank you.
There's another online question, also from Ian Fry. What do you think your direct to consumer customers' top reasons are for buying direct from Hudson Valley? Do you think it's traceability, related to traceability, sustainability, freshness?
So our first farmers market that we participated in was in Kingston. And it was pretty low tech as far as compared to what we're doing now. And I was there a lot of weeks, I guess I should say. So I had a lot of face to face with the customers, which was really interesting. And I did some short surveys. And the most important thing at that market was the fish being local. That was it. By far, that was the biggest, that was the most important aspect.
The solids are filtered out of the system, I imagine have a high water content. How it to be used by the composting company, does it have to be dewatered somehow, and how is it done?
Yeah, it's, a sludge press. So the sludge is deep water pressed, the water sent back to the wastewater plant, and then, the composting company gets this. It's almost like topsoil, but more clayish, I guess, like the texture is like.
So for the water treatment, is the wastewater treatment, outside the facility? Is it covered or not covered?
It's in its own separate building,
But it is covered.
yes.
All right. One more question? Is there one more question? Eugene, do you have one more? Good. All right, nothing else online? All right, well, thank you so much, Brittany.
Yeah.
Thank you again, Brittany, and we're going to start transitioning into our next speaker. That's going to be Dr. David Lott with Cornell AgriTech Center for Sustainability, also our sponsors for our summit event. And Dr. Lott is going to be speaking to us about eDNA and the applications of eDNA in aquaculture.
Good,
Yes.
terrific, thank you. Thank you, Mike, for that introduction. It's a pleasure to be here with you to learn more myself on aquaculture operations in the region, and to introduce you to an exciting area of research that I think may have some applications in aquaculture, if not to indoor recirculating systems, like to other types of. So I'm here in a couple of different roles today. One is the director of the Cornell AgriTech Center for Sustainability, as Mike said, for sponsoring this previous workshops on seafood. But I'm also here as a researcher who has been working with many collaborators in the laboratory for 15 years on environmental DNA. Talking about it, that's a serious term to you. So first, let me say a little bit about Cornell Atkinson Center. We are the hub at Cornell for sustainability research across the university. And we think of ourselves more a knowledge to impact organization. And what we mean by that is we're about marshaling the intellectual capital illustrated on the left hand into this diagram. All the faculty, students, and staff expertise at Cornell, and marshaling it toward timely, important topics to drive change in the world, not in the academy, but outside the academy, the kind of change illustrated on the right hand of this slide. We want to be bringing faculty together across disciplines and turning them together on problems of climate, energy, food, and One Health. And you can see there's some overlap between aquaculture, food, and One Health for sure. And so we're about trying to bring research expertise to change and inform, improve products or practices in aquaculture, in food, for fishes, for example, a couple of examples, and about informing government policies that may be important. So that's the overall mission of Cornell AgriTech. That resonates strongly with the recent strategic plan from NOAA, which is, of course, a good sponsor of the series of seafood summits for Sea Grant, where there's an emphasis on science informing the growth of aquaculture industries in the United States, and bringing science to bear in driving that growth and development. So that's the spirit that I'm here today. So now, let me take a step back first and give you a little bit of my own experience. I'm an ecologist by training, an aquatic ecologist. About 15 years ago, my collaborators and I were working with the Army Corps of Engineers and a bunch of other U.S. federal, Canadian, and state agencies in the Great Lakes region. And the challenge was trying to protect both the Great Lakes and the Mississippi watershed from invasive species, harmful species that people are introduced where they belong, including this used to call Asian carp, now we call it big-headed carps, in the Chicago area waterway. For those of you who are unfamiliar with the geography and the waterway connections in the Chicago area, there's a series of canals that artificially connect the Great Lakes watershed with the Mississippi watershed to the great watersheds of America. And those canals, among many other benefits, also provide some risk for the transfer, for the dispersal of invasive species like Asian carps. Well, long story short, Army Corps of Engineers and all those other agencies I mentioned were very aware that traditional biological sampling tools for fishes, and this applies to many other organisms as well, fishes, it's electrofishing, netting, acoustics. Those agencies were aware that those tools tend to be quite blunt, not very sensitive. And if you're trying to detect the leading edge of an invasion, where by definition, individuals are few, that is, the population density is low, and this won't apply to all applications, but for invasive species, that's a frequent case. You want to know where the leading edge is so you can do something about it. So you can kill them, prevent them from spreading, and so forth. Those agencies were looking for a different tool. And we said, well, we think there may be a different kind of approach here. And that led us in the first large-scale application to an important management issue of environmental DNA. And cut to the end of the story, lots involved in this, but within a year, we had taken water samples and identified the DNA of these fishes of concern in places that were very troubling. The invasion was much further advanced than had previously been thought, and so lots of management action in the last 15 years has been informed in very important ways by our eDNA results. And more broadly and globally, now hundreds, if not thousands of scientific publications published every year on environmental DNA, and the applications extend far beyond the detection of invasive species. They include all sorts of fisheries management applications, endangered species detection, habitat location for endangered species, and environmental management, environmental assessment for many, so forth, like offshore wind. So lots of applications growing, and the technology, you can think of this just as another technology, a tool, but with incredibly powerful and wide-ranging applications. And those applications are now reaching practice in the private sector and in government. So now let me take a step back. And I don't want this to be mysterious, so some of you may know all about this, but some of you may not. So what are you talking about? What is environmental DNA? So think of this as the environmental protection or environmental management equivalent of what forensic scientists do every day at crime scenes, or what forensic scientists could do in this conference room after we all leave today. They could come in here and they could collect from the tables where we're sitting DNA from us, from saliva, from skin cells, from hair. Every organism, including fishes and every other aquatic organism you might be interested in aquaculture, leave a trail of DNA behind them, and that trail is detected. Now, forensic scientists are trying to do something quite specific. They're not just wanting to know whether there were Homo sapiens in this conference room. They're wanting to know which individual even was here. And that can be done too, and we've been working for that in environmental DNA. But the current off-the-shelf ready-to-use applications in management are a bit cruder. You're saying, what species are there, and increasingly, how many individuals are there? What's an index of population density? And all that's required, there's nothing really very complicated about this, is a water sample. You can take that in very simple ways. You can take it for complicated equipment, but you're just trying to get a water sample. And then you are trying to separate the particulate matter from the water sample. And that particulate matter is going to contain cells and other debris that organisms are left behind that have DNA in them. So you're just trying to concentrate the particles, some of which are going to have DNA in them. That's usually done by filtration. There's other ways to do it, but usually some sort of filtration. And then you're extracting the DNA from the subset of particles that you separated from the water that have DNA in them. And then you want to identify, and in some cases quantify, that DNA. And this is where the more high-tech laboratory work comes in. I've illustrated a couple of important machines and approaches that we use in quantitative polymerase chain reaction or digital droplet PCR. But these are decade-old technologies, so there's nothing new about these technologies. Laboratories all over the world are using these technologies for decades for other applications. All we and now many other scientists have done is bring these things together and work on environmental DNA. And then you want to identify the DNA that you separated. What organisms does it come from? And how much DNA is there? That's it. That's what we're talking about. Talking about eDNA. But the power of this is that you don't have to cast the organism. And you don't have to farm the organism, you don't have to seed the organism, but yet you can gain a lot of information about it. And you can do so much faster, more cheaply, and more sensitively than most traditional biological sample tools. So there are 4 basic ways of going about this now, and I can go into detail if you like on these, but for the sake of just introducing you to this, the simplest, most straightforward approach is the first one I'm set up here, where maybe there's just a single species, maybe it's a predator, maybe it's a parasite or a pathogen in aquaculture that you're looking for. There's just a simple single species detection approach that you can take if you just care about that one species. Or as we get to detect more species, Jose Andres, collaborator at Cornell, has recently developed for the New York DEC what we call a multiplex approach. With a single water sample, with a single analysis, we can detect the presence of 52 invasive species in this case. Could be parasite species or pathogen species or your aquaculture species, whatever you're interested in, at one go with one water sample. And then number 3 is you can, in theory, detect all the species that have left DNA in any water sample. And that takes a little more complicated approach. You're using some additional templates of PCR, but your DNA as a template in PCR. But in theory, this is quite possible, and not just theory, that's just its full research. People are doing this in application management applications all the time now. So it just depends on what question you're asking about which of these approaches you would want to use. In all 3 of these approaches, you can get at number 4, because the more individuals of an organism are in the environment, the more DNA molecules you will detect having been left behind that environment. And increasingly, especially in fisheries management, some great studies on the West Coast for capture fisheries, where the amount of environmental DNA detected in water samples correlates very strongly with the abundance of commercially exploited species like hake that are indicated with the traditional tools like acoustics and nets and so forth. So increasingly we can get abundance as well. And again, for many of these applications, this is faster, cheaper, more accurate, more sensitive than traditional tools. So there's a group of us, experts in academia and government, that have been meeting the last few years, roughly every other year in marine eDNA workshops. Out of the last workshop in the Los Angeles area in September of 2022, a number of papers came out of that. Before that workshop, published papers highlighting what the opportunities are to start to deploy more rapidly environmental DNA in policy and management settings. And then out of that workshop, one of the papers that came out from a bunch of us was a recommendation to the U.S. federal government that a national strategy for environmental DNA be developed. And this is a figure from that paper, including pointing out that aquaculture is one of the potential areas of application. And talk more about that together in a few minutes. And then after this workshop, the White House Office of Science and Technology took up this recommendation, and they are actively developing an environmental DNA strategy for the U.S. government now. Their anticipated release of that is in internal review within the federal government now. Their anticipated release is June, which will be timed roughly to coincide with the 3rd annual Marine Environmental DNA Workshop. So I point out both of these things because some of you, whether individual suppliers or maybe aquaculture professional associations, may be interested in tracking this national strategy that's going to come out, and may be interested in attending or sending a representative to the national workshop on eDNA, which is designed to bring it's not just a scientific meeting, it's designed to bring practitioners, policymakers, and research experts together. That's the whole point of this. It's a different kind of workshop, much in the spirit of a sea grant sort of spirit. In the last few years, there have been a number of papers published illustrating applications of environmental DNA specifically in the aquaculture arena. And most of these that I illustrated are for not indoor, but in the natural environment, near shore or offshore. In aquaculture, but I'm going to invite you to think about other kinds of applications for which environmental DNA might be useful. So I'm going to show you a few slides, the flavor of this. There's potential to use it, as I mentioned before, think of parasites and pathogens that are important to monitor. There's a lot of work going in, again, this is the environment, to quantify the impacts and better managing the impacts of aquaculture facilities by looking at the environments, comparing environments in vicinity or at distance from aquaculture facilities to try to detect what those impacts are, and again, trying to manage them better. And then looking at the international arena, the UN agency, Agency for Aquatic Animal Health Standards, this is the working paper title from a couple of years ago, is promoting the use of environmental DNA for parasites and pathogens. So there's some obvious applications, maybe not obvious for all types of aquaculture, but for some types of aquaculture. Now, increasingly, the services, environmental DNA services, if you're wondering, well, how do I do any of these sorts of things, are available from the private sector and many nonprofits, including universities. I just highlight one here, which is a lab that we started at Cornell that it serves research, but also can serve outside users who would like some eDNA analysis. Andres, who was one of the co-directors of this survey, who's developed this multiplex approach for invasive species in New York EEC. And so I could mention if anyone is interested in some other suppliers, goods and services for environmental DNA. Here's one that's local. And I'm not an agriculture expert, so now I'm going to shift and invite you to think about this. We'd be happy to have a conversation among the people in this room as well. But to see that conversation, I put 4 questions up here that I think are likely And are there purposes in your operations or operations that you're familiar with, for which you're already sampling organisms? You want to know, it's important for you to know what organisms, what species are present, whether they're species you're trying to grow, or that's not the problem, no, whether they're not, but species it's important for you to know, are they in the vicinity, are they parasites, are they predators? Or maybe it's inciting aquaculture. Again, this would be most relevant to the natural environment. What would be a good place to put an aquaculture or aquaculture facility? What wouldn't be a good place? What are the organisms you need to know? If in aquaculture you need to know what organisms are there, this is something that is worth exploring, at least whether this would be a relevant complement or perhaps a replacement to traditional ways of learning what organisms are there that are important to you. And I think, if not in aquaculture, certainly in other settings of the marine environment and inland waters, this is already being deployed by the federal government as part of assessing the siting and evaluation of offshore wind facilities, because there's just not another way to learn what organisms are in areas of big expanse at a long distance from shore in a time. It would take, the alternative to this are taking samples of organisms that alone is often expensive, depending on what you're trying to say at the bottom of the water column, and then handing those samples over to expert biologists who might take weeks, months, years actually identify what organisms are there. So this, for some applications, is revolutionary and will be a big part of the future. But you tell me whether you think that could be the case for aquaculture. So I'm open for any questions or comments. And again, comments are very welcome, and conversation among those of you in the room would be very welcome.
Hi, thank you for explaining more about eDNA. This isn't necessarily a comment for Hudson Valley Fisheries, because we're a RAS farm.
Yep.
You know, we're not really concerned with this. However, as a member of the U.S. Trout Farmers Association, I guess I'll kind of make a comment on the concerns that other farmers have expressed about eDNA being used as kind of a blanket. They're concerned that eDNA will be used as like a blanket obstacle to any kind of stocking, any kind of fish movement that they need to do to conduct their businesses. And I know obviously you're not a regulator, but that's kind of the sense that I get, is that there's a lot of concern on eDNA tests being used against farmers. I guess for an example, with a stocking farm, let's say that there is a pathogen that's endemic to a river that's being used to farm the fish. And obviously there can be a difference between abundance in the water versus actually enough pathogen to cause fish disease. So I think that's the concern, is where is that line drawn in the regulation then? And then who is drawing that line?
No, great question. Yeah, I'm not unfamiliar with these concerns. There are parts of the aquaculture industry that are quite vocal about this technology. And then I'm so familiar with some of these concerns. I think here's the start. I mean, one of the concerns is, I think some of the fears just come from a lack of just understanding. Every new technology is based initially often with their business. If you don't fully understand it, if you don't understand it, you don't try. So I think there's a lot of education that needs to go on. It's also Has to be said though, and I emphasize that it is very sensitive. You can detect very low abundance of organisms. That's the whole advantage in some of the applications. So you have to, if you want to, just knowing an organism is species doesn't mean that it's biologically significant. Doesn't mean just as you did this example you said. So this tool alone is never like any tool. You don't just take results, just don't give you an interpretation on your own. You have to meaningfully and carefully analyze the information you get. So we are increasingly able to get abundance information. So that needs to be filtered through a decision process that is informed by lots more than just whether you're eating the organism. There is all how abundant was it, at what abundance does such an organism get to be biologically significant or keep up attention. So just it's better information, and you just have to interpret it carefully. Now it's also the case, and you didn't bring this up, but I'll just put this on the table, that early on, and still sometimes you hear criticism that, well, this is not worth paying attention to, because eDNA could have gotten there some other way. Because there is a real difference here with the traditional tools. You have an organism. So there's a question that is there. There is an additional level of question that you have to ask. Yes, the DNA is there, but what gives us confidence that the organism was there in the vicinity, in the recent past, being significant? And again, that just takes a lot of interpreting the data through everything else that we know. We don't interpret these data with impact. So what we do know is that in most of the circumstances where you would be interested in applying this, the DNA degrades within a matter of hours, days. So you can be quite confident that if you detect DNA, the organism was there recently. Now, it is also the case that, well, maybe a bird ate the organism somewhere else and pooped where you sample the larva. That and other explanations are possible, just like it's possible that blood sample, criminal stuff like that. You have to filter that, okay, what's the problem? And recognizing that passage of DNA guts, how long the passage anyway. So there's lots of things to consider, but none of those are remotely disqualifying for using this as a requirement. Does that help?
Yeah, no, I appreciate, it definitely makes sense. I agree with you that if this is a tool that we can use to decrease the cost of regulatory testing for fish farms, because it's one of the largest costs of running a fish farm, particularly if you're doing stocking and transferring fish, is testing for pathogens. And so if it's something that can be used to detect those without doing the 180, 200 fish sampling events and testing each individual fish, that would be great. But yeah, there are still, like you said, it's new technology. There's some reticence of regulators, just broad stroke. If it's there, you can't do anything, which hopefully that happens, but right, it takes interpretation.
Yeah, and I realize sometimes in industry, the trust of regulatory judgments isn't always super high. But at some level in this whole process, and even is not unique, it's just a new technology. So every new technology, there's a process. Consider limitations and strengths that is translated into sometimes into regulations, into rulemaking, and there's got to be reasonable decisions made in that process. Those are the kinds of things that we and the others have brought input in the federal government in this national eDNA strategy that's under development. You need to start moving, federal government, you need to start moving this into practice But to do that, there's got to be approved standards so that you're confident that something I'm doing. You've got to, there gotta be standards, you gotta have a lab that's strong. So in every other, you can think about any industry standard, well, there's certifications about how you do it, who did it. So you first of all have confidence that if somebody says eDNA or very good actually was there. And then there's the other steps of turning that into
Other questions?
Mr. Cap, Bill, I do. Thank you, and Brittany has a good point. That's a good point. Aquaculture is under a level of scrutiny or criticism that for some reason, most other agriculture sectors just aren't under, so I can also understand the caution. Agriculturists might feel that being able to also use against them. But your point is well taken. I think there's plenty of very useful applications of this, including one of, for rats in particular, where we're self-contained. It's like, you're fine as long as you keep everything out. So, incoming water is your main, one of the weak points, I guess, feed, which technically should be pasteurized first. So something like this, especially a panel screening of multiple pathogens coming in, would be a really very useful application on maybe a weekly basis or seasonal basis. Because even in Ithaca, sometimes the water is surface water if it's raining a lot, and then sometimes it's going through, a lot of limestone and it's been filtered much more. It's just very variable. A lot of qualities with possibly pathogen content, and then of course once you get into open water and environmental contact, also you can see it being useful in detecting things that in advance. When we say aquaculture, the probably industries. Once you see it, it's oftentimes too late. So having an early warning, something like the around could be extremely useful, and making it easy like this to have a couple, one water sample, a few water samples, and doing a panel, I think would be a very good addition to pretty much any kind of aquaculture format.
Yeah, I mean, your comments made me think of a couple of things. I mean, are there ways to turn sensitivity from a concern to an asset as an early warning system? Even can you detect things that you're worried about even before they're biologically significant, so that you can take prevention or prophylactic action? Yes, that would be one thought. Another is that, I guess I was anticipating maybe this multiplex panel approach might be something that could be useful in a variety of settings. And no one's asking this, but I'm going to answer the question, how much would this cost? Because I presume that would be a question that would come up fairly soon. And I think there's probably some scaling here. A very small operator is not going to do this very often, but for like that 52 panel invasive species detection approach, that's about $100 a sample for you get the answer for all 52 of those species. And of course, the more samples you get, the scale. Development cost. That actually includes, if you're doing 100 samples or so, it'd be about $100 a sample. So you would have to tell me that your reaction to that is like, are we going to get that? Is that sound like possible?
And the question following up, the cost is, how quickly do you get a response? Because that's part of the benefits, right?
You could, I mean, if it's a real, if everything's lined up right and it's urgent, you could get their answers in a day.
So I'm thinking about how a lot of towns. A lot of towns in Long Island, they do, and the state, they do sampling for fecal coliform bacteria. Is eDNA fine scale enough that you could kind of correlate it to like quantities, because they still do like colony forming units that they're plating and then base some numbers off.
Yes, for fecal coliform, for PABs, harmful algal blooms. This kind of approach is very useful. And in fact, you could say, I mean, those genetic approaches to detecting those kind of things are just precursors to this environment. I'll make a distinction that doesn't matter long, I just want to make you think about this. The big advantage of environmental DNA is for organisms that you can't adapt easily. With HABs or fecal coliform, you're actually capturing thousands of those organisms in a water sample. But still, the genetic approaches are faster.
Yeah, because some of the tests that, the reason I'm bringing this up, New York City is interested in doing a project trying to use cultured red mussels to filter out fecal coliform bacteria. The current methods that are being used have like plus or minus 50% error. So like the sampling, their typical protocols have such a wide range. And what we've been doing for the experiments is actually doing flow cytometry, but that's the state municipalities are not going to uptake, use that. But for the research, we're showing that it's greatly, the reduction is so much greater than what the typical colony forming unit method is. So that's why I'm curious if this would be much more accurate and better.
Do that with the genetic approach. Another application is not all here, but your comment makes me think of it. Lots of people are using this now to look at the diets of different organisms. So you could look at the guts of your oysters too. It looks like a mush under the microscope, but you can just do genetic analysis on that and say all the organisms that it ate just on the DNA signal or predatory fish, or is it quicker or faster way to get a dietary composition than all microscopic analysis that is typically done by biologists. And I don't mean to oversell this, you don't always get all of the information, you get traditional tools, of course, but the quicker, faster, cheaper can often make people pretty enthusiastic about it, even if you don't get every typical one.
My question?
All right, David, I have a question for you. Is it safe to say that if some of our industry participants or some future listeners of our summit events are interested in exploring eDNA applications, that you or colleagues might be interested in exploring a grant to look into what kind of applications might be feasible for this operation?
Yeah, I would refer people specifically, I'm happy to entertain and pass on inquiries, and maybe they're being relevant to me directly, but I would also refer to Jose and Steve, I pictured on that last slide. He's at that is environmental eDNA center, and you can find that on the website and pass on.
Thank you. All right, last call for questions. Nothing online. All right, thank you so much. All right, so we're going to transition into our kind of final session of speakers. We're going to have a little panel looking at a variety of resources that are available to the industry, both on the aquaculture end, business end, as well as on the processing end. So since I'm one of those speakers, I'm going to start us off since I'm already up here. And I'm really just going to introduce you to a variety of resources that are available through your NYSG grant. Pretty much everything I'm going to talk to you today about is available for those in person on the back table. There'll also be links and QR codes throughout where you can access them online. Thank you, Olga. And not sharing either. Yeah. All right. Apologies, our virtual participants. That's fine.
Green in the middle, just green.
I get kicked out.
No, you're on. You just gotta hit share.
All right. All right, we're good. Perfect. All right, thanks everybody for bearing with me there. So again, we're looking at New York City resources. For those in person, they're in the back of the room. For those online, they're all available free online. The first I want to show you are a series of regulatory guides that were developed about 2 years ago. A lot of these were developed through our seafood and seaweed processing and marketing task force that we developed in response to the pandemic. We brought various sectors of New York's seafood industries, producers, wholesalers, retailers, distributors, as well as agencies and academic institutions together to have discussions and conversations around what were the challenges and to find ways where we can help support. One of those being the complex regulatory framework around bringing food to market, right? Especially if you're a producer, you're used to working with the agencies regulating the farming, the permitting and all of that. Now you're trying to bring product to market and it's a completely new field. It's a whole new set of regulations and it's fairly complex. And so we developed a series of regulatory guides. There's 4 in total. One is on bivalve musky shellfish because they're regulated slightly different than most of other seafoods. We've got wild caught one, we've got farm fish one, and more recently we developed our seaweed processing and marketing task force. Because as I mentioned, there's emerging interest in growing the seaweed industry here in New York. These guides, they're really designed to be e-publications or online publications, and each has this flowchart, a regulatory flowchart that walks you through the various avenues or various markets that you can access. And as you go through that guide, there are numbers between one step and the next. When you click on that, it'll pop up and it'll show you the requirements for getting one step to the next. So really try to make these as user-friendly as possible. They're also considered living documents. So we don't really have a lot of hard copies. One in the back, if you open them up, there's a QR code where you can access online. So you can access them at any time and they'll be updated over time as needed, as well as regulations change. So those are all available to producers as especially if you're exploring changing markets and looking to dive into new markets. We have a series of topical resources that are also available to our producers. These were developed to complement the regulatory guide. So within that regulatory guide, what you'll see is it's going to go through a variety of the regulations, simply stating them and linking you to more resources. But it doesn't go into a lot of detail around what it is you actually do, what that regulation entails. And so these topical guides were generated to cover more in detail some of that information. So seafood HACCP, if you're a seafood producer, you know seafood HACCP. But if you're unfamiliar with seafood HACCP, there's a 2-page guide that gives you kind of the basics of seafood HACCP, the various components of the HACCP plan. Allergens and cross-contact, a lot of emphasis in our manufacturing practices. If you're working with seafoods, which are major food allergens in the US, you need to be aware of allergens and cross-contact, especially if you're working with multiple species or multiple products. There's a guide on helping understand food labeling in New York. The GMPs are our good manufacturing practices, information on sanitation, best practices for delivery and mailing, marketing guide, and then the enhancing safety and marketing is really geared towards those producers who are not subject to the seafood HACCP regulation, but it's really good for you to understand what it entails and what is required because those you're selling your product to need to comply with that regulation, and they will impose requirements on you to make sure they can meet those requirements, right? And so that's what that guide is doing. These are all available again in the back. They're available on the website in the bottom right, and that QR code will also take you directly to that website.
Now it's showing presenter mode on.
Can't win today, can I?
It's the two screens.
All right, you guys in the room okay watching the presenter? Yeah. All right. See, we also have a series of topical guides for our seaweed resources. So their seaweed is regulated a little bit different. So for anybody familiar or interested in getting into that space, we can talk a long time about seaweed regulation because it is not considered a seafood. It is categorized as a raw agricultural commodity, and thus is regulated under the preventive controls for human. So a lot of resources to help you understand that. There's also a guide helping you understand the difference between HACCP and preventive controls. Because some operations in some states are actually regulated seaweed under HACCP, but if they grow and expand and are now federally regulated and subject to CETA, will have to transition to this new regulation. There's also a guide on best practices for handling seaweed, and the newest is our harvesting food grade seaweed guide. And that was really in support of our emerging industry on New York. There's not a lot of guidance on what are the food safety hazards associated with seaweed, how do we ensure we're harvesting food grade product from our New York waters. So that's what that guide was really meant to address. Looks at the most likely culprits in terms of environmental contaminants and how you can control them, what kind of pressure you can for to ensure you're limiting any kind of risk of public health upon consumption. So again, those are all available for free. We do provide seafood safety training, so seafood HACCP trainings. I administer our segment 1 online course. I also teach segment 2 to get the seafood HACCP training certificate through the Association of Public Officials. And for anyone not familiar with seafood HACCP, it stands for Hazard Analysis and Critical Control Points. And all seafood processors in the U.S. are required to have a HACCP trained individual and a HACCP plan for processing any of their seafood products that they're sending to U.S. commerce. We've also got a variety of guides that were geared towards helping the industry better market and educate their consumers and buyers. So these are some customizable marketing resources that we developed a few years back. On the front of the cards, there are illustrations of the various species. We have 34 species in total. They're designed as 5x8 index cards, and you can see the little icons in the bottom right and left. You can actually click on that and upload your own logo, so you can brand these as your own. You can also upload the other one, a QR code, which will link to a website or to a video or whatever you want. On the back, these are all fillable PDFs. So all of that, those blue sections, blue squares, you can fill in the information that is relevant for you and your business. We also are trying to encourage chefs and restaurants to utilize these, talk about the preparation in that about section, and use those to educate their buyers and their retail establishments and how they're actually sourcing product, where it's coming from, and create those connections and build those stories. You can also link the producer websites. And if you have that information, especially if you're buying direct from your farmer, you may be able to provide a date and type of harvest for them. We recently published a variety of nutrition resources. We used to have a set of 6. We've increased that now to a set of 20 different species. So there are these illustrated cards. They're all in the back, so you're welcome to take as many as you'd like. They have the nutrition information on the various species, and on the back they have some barcodes, some additional information. We can find more nutrition for a variety of other species. These are designed as 4x6 cards, so they're kind of postcard style. Again, these are available for free online. We have some hard copies printed, and with all of our resources, especially those marketing resources, if you reach out to us, I'm happy to send you with cop marks so you can have them professionally printed. Use that in your facilities to educate your own consumer buyers. We also have a series of seafood cards. These are 2.5 by 3 inch kind of business card style fact sheets. There are 17 in total, 3 sets, one looking at identifying fresh seafood, one at handling seafood, and one at preparing seafood. The idea behind these was to give the industry kind of this resource to help better educate their buyers. So for instance, we have one on handling shellfish. If you are selling shellfish in a farmer's market, you want to make sure that your buyers are keeping it home and handling it safely so that they don't make themselves sick and then blame you. You can use these cards to educate that, send them with that, so they understand and know how to safely handle the shellfish. And then we have those for a variety of species. These cards, as well as the nutrition cards, are now available in Spanish. We'll get them online soon, but we just have them translated, so we've got them now in English and Spanish. That is just an intro to some of the more relevant resources, but we do have a variety of other resources that are available, looking at HACCP sustainability, local species, seafood safety. Again, all available for free online as well as in the background. So we'll save some questions for later because we have a couple more speakers. And I will be here all day, so if you have any side, and I'm happy to talk more about the various resources we have. And while I'm transitioning to the next slide, I'd also say that we're very open to developing more resources as needed for the industry. So if there are specific resources that you might want or might find useful, I encourage you to reach out and let us know so that we can see about developing those resources out for you in the industry. All right, so next I want to invite out Jamie. Jamie Epstein is with the Farm Service Agency and is going to talk about some various programs that could benefit our aquaculture producers in New York State.
It was right at one point.
All right, there, we're gonna get this right. All right. First. All right.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Jamie Epstein. Thank you very much for having me here today. I'm a program technician with the Farm Service Agency in Onondaga County. Just a little bit about the Farm Service Agency. We are a division of the USDA, and we primarily administer the programs that are in the Farm Bill for farmers and producers. How our agency is structured is each county within the state, or most counties within the state, are going to have a county office. And then we have a state office that's located in Syracuse, New York. And then within the office structure, we have a county executive director, and then the program technicians. And then we have a county committee that's a group of elected farmers that helps to make program decisions or program determinations. Within the state office, we do have various state program specialists, and they help administer our main programs within the state. So in addition to being the program technician in Onondaga County, I'm also the state EPT for disaster programs. So I work closely with our state specialists to make sure and to help administer these programs throughout the state, to help them gather information so that we can make these programs more effective for our producers. So two of the main programs that I want to give you guys information on today are the two that are going to be most applicable to aquaculture, specifically farm-raised fish. I will be honest and say that our experience with farm-raised fish producers is limited at this point. Most of what we have dealt with has been down in Suffolk County with mollusks and oysters. So we are very happy to have this opportunity to learn more about your operations today, and hopefully we can take this information back and help make this more available or more widely known to producers of farm-raised fish. So the first program I want to talk about is the Emergency Assistance for Livestock, Honeybees, and Farm-Raised Fish. Here at FSA, we like to use our acronyms, so we refer to this as the ELAP program. And that is going to provide assistance for losses of livestock, honeybees, and farm-raised fish due to disease, adverse weather, or other conditions that are determined eligible by the Secretary of Ag. So we have a set list of eligible loss conditions, which we'll talk about in a minute, but that doesn't mean that we can't request coverage for new events that come. The other program that we have is the Non-Insured Crop Disaster Assistance Program, or NAP for short. And this is going to reduce financial losses that happen to producers when natural disasters cause loss of production or value of the crop. So kind of the difference in the two, ELAP is going to cover losses kind of the animal itself, and NAP is going to cover losses of production and value. So some differences between the two programs, they are very similar. Both are going to cover the physical losses in excess of normal mortality when these loss conditions occur. So we do have to account for some normal mortality in the losses. It's expected as part of the operation that there would be some loss. So we will look at anything that is in excess of those mortality rates. ELAP will also cover losses to purchased or harvested feed that was lost due to an eligible disaster event. Whereas NAP does not cover any part of the feed, it's just, again, the production and value. ELAP does not have any kind of a service fee. There's really no pre-sign up to the program. NAP is more, I will say like an insurance program, but I don't necessarily want you to think of it as that, but that is something that you do have to sign up for coverage ahead of the program year. Whereas ELAP, the loss happens and then you would call the office and start the process. The coverage period, for those two programs is a little bit different. So ELAP is gonna be calendar year, so January 1st to December 31st. It'll, cover losses that happen within that time frame. Whereas NAP is gonna be a coverage period of October 1st to September 30th. So a little bit different, and that can be a little bit confusing. But just one is calendar year and the other one is not. So again, ELAP, there's no pre-enrollment. The disaster happens, you call the office. But for the NAP program, you do have to sign up for coverage ahead of time at the beginning of that coverage period. So as far as eligible producers for the two programs, they are relatively the same. The owner of the fish must own or lease the property that they're using with readily identifiable boundaries. The producer must have control of the waterbed or the ground under the specific type of water. So if it's like a fish hatchery, if they're renting the land, we have to see leases that show they have permission to use that land. For ELAP, producers have to, as far as the feed coverage goes, they have to have either produce the feed or purchase the feed specifically for the farm-raised fish. Both programs, they do have to be considered commercial operators of the product, so it can't just be for personal use, although I don't know how applicable that would be to your operation. For both programs, so we do have to, so when it comes to control of the waterbeds, we actually will have somebody come to the office, show us the area that they are using, and then we were going to outline that area on one of our FSA maps. And then that is what we will use to use reports for the operation. So as far as eligible farm-raised fish, for ELAP, it's going to be any game or bait fish that's raised for sport by recreational anglers. And again, those species have to have been approved for coverage. It's also going to be any species grown for human consumption. Any fish that are raised as food for fish that are consumed by humans, or any ornamental fish propagated and reared in an aquatic environment. For NAP, it's a little bit different. They have to be for human consumption or raised as feed for fish that are consumed by humans. NAP will not cover the ornamental fish. So just a little bit different depending on what operation you have. And these are just some examples of some species we currently have approved. So for ELAP, large and smallmouth bass, walleye, trout, and minnows. For NAP, black tilapia, bluegill, channel catfish, crappies, koi, largemouth bass, perch, and trout. And just because this is the list we have now, doesn't mean we can't add new species for coverage if that need arises. So it's just a request that we put down to BC with some data to ask them to cover it for the program here. I think the biggest obstacle we encounter when asking for coverage on specific species is we do have to have pricing information and mortality rates set, and we'll talk about that a little bit here, a couple more slides, but that's information that we have to gather and put together when we present this to DC, and sometimes we have a hard time finding sources for that information. So a lot of times I'll reach out to our producers and ask them for that information or academic sources, so if you guys have any good resources, it would be good to get along our way, because we're always looking for new sources. So as far as eligible loss conditions, they're really the same for both programs. It does have to be a natural disaster or weather related, which depending on the operation can be a little bit tricky, but earthquake, excessive heat, flood, hurricane, freeze, lightning, and then drought is only an eligible cause for the NAM program, not for EFAP. And if it's an indoor facility, you know, some of these things might not affect it. So this might only be applicable to somebody in a catastrophic loss situation. And then ineligible causes, again, same for both programs, things like brownouts, failure of power supply, failure to follow good aquatic practices or good management practices, neglect by the producer, wildlife damage, lack of market, and growing environments that don't meet the definition of a controlled environment. We'll talk about that in a minute. Those are all examples of ineligible losses. So again, it does have to be due to natural disasters or weather related. So for us, the definition of a controlled environment is an environment for crops that a controlled environment is expected to be provided, including but not limited to ornamental nursery, aquaculture, floriculture, an environment where everything is practically controlled by the structure. There's appropriate facilities, growing media provided by the producer. And that according to industry standards, it would be considered a controlled environment. So that all falls into best management practices when we're looking at these applications. So some things that we consider best management would be a facility that has flood prevention, provides growing media to the aquaculture species, provides feeding, the irrigation and water quality is in place and is monitored. There's appropriate measures for predator control and disease control. So the monitoring that you guys were talking about as far as like water quality, things like that, that's all stuff that we need to have proof of when somebody files an application. So testing results or a feeding schedule, receipts for purchase of feed, all things like that are stuff that we would collect to go with an application when somebody files it. And basically when the application is looked at for a determination, our county committee has to be satisfied that producer was following all of the best management practices and that the losses were due to failure on the producer's part. So we talked about at the beginning a little bit, in addition to the animal loss, ELAP will also cover feed losses. And again, it does have to be feed that's lost or damaged because of an eligible loss condition. Again, it has to be purchased or harvested feed that's intended to be used as feed for the fish. And then it has to be physically located in the county where the eligible loss condition occurred. So, you know, if for some reason your feed storage facility is in Onondaga County and your fish facility is in Cayuga County and a tornado comes through and takes out a facility in Cayuga County, we can't cover any losses on the feed stored in Onondaga County because that's not where the tornado occurred. And that's just the examples of eligible loss conditions, the earthquake, flood, hurricane, tornado, and wildfire. Again, wildlife would not be considered eligible cause, so I don't know if that would be an issue, but if wildlife got into the facility and ate all the food, that's not going to be. So documentation that will be required from a producer that does want to participate in these programs. We need to have For both of them, we need to have an FSA 578, and this is an acreage report. And it's reporting surface acres of water. So again, we would take a look at where the facility is, draw it in on our FSA maps, and then kind of draw in where the actual water was located. Both of the reports for both programs are going to be due by September 30th of the previous year. So for 2024, this report was due on file by September 30th of 2023. That's not to say that if somebody didn't file that report by that time, that it couldn't be accepted. Sometimes there are late file provisions that can be filed. But one of the big things with all of our programs is going to be deadlines. Sometimes we're able to have exceptions or ways to accept something that's late filed, and there's a couple of other deadlines that if you miss them, it's an automatic disapproval of the application and we can't provide it. So deadlines are really big. The other thing that we kind of talked about is we need leases or ownership proof of the aquaculture facility. So if you are renting the land where your operation is, we need that lease on file. Sometimes, you know, it's preferable to have, if there's a written agreement, to have that, but we can take a conversation with the landowner as well to provide that proof. So both programs' inventory records are going to be big. They would need to be verifiable or reliable inventory records. So for ELAB, you need proof of the inventory prior to the disaster, and then inventory immediately after. Immediately after the disaster. You need, again, the documentation to support the control of the facility, to support the ownership of the fish. So kind of your business papers. And for feed loss, you need verifiable or reliable documentation of the purchase or harvested feed. Verifiable is something that we can call a third party and verify the information that is on the paper. Reliable has to be detailed and then not acceptable by our committee. And then for both programs, documentation supporting best management practices for health. As far as FSA responsibilities, we are going to establish normal mortality rates for each species by size, and then that's approved by our national office. We establish a standard unit of measure, and then also what the average fair market value is of that unit of measure. So this is where input from the industry helps us establish these different things that have to be approved by national office. And this is just an example of what we would use as a standard unit conversion for what we would look for when producers are tracking inventory. And if they're not necessarily tracking it in the units that are listed here, we can help with those conversions. So, for example, I work a lot with vegetable producers. They track the production of their vegetables in pounds. Our unit of measure for vegetables is hundredweights. I help them convert it from pounds to hundredweight. So we will help producers and work with them to get the information to a point where we can use it. Just a couple of payment examples to kind of help understand these programs. So for ELAB for the physical losses, the formula for the payment is pounds of fish that died in excess of normal mortality times the fair market value that we've established for that size and type times the program factor, and then there's a congressional sequestration rate that's applied to those payments. So you can see that example down there with kind of the loss scenario and then how that payment is calculated. NAP is going to be similar, except we're looking at the value of the inventory prior to the disaster and then what the value of that inventory is after the disaster. Still have that congressional sequestration rate. It's 5.7% for the next couple of years. They used to change it yearly, but they were nice enough to established at the same for a few years. And then this is just an example of what our feed loss calculation would look like. Our national payment factor on the feed loss is 60%. Again, just payment calculation on harvested feed. I do have copies of this presentation that you guys can have to work through these payment calculations on to enter if you'd like them. We talked a little bit about this, about the structure of what FSA and within USDA is, our county committee members. One thing that has been a big push is to recognize any producer that might be a member of a historically underserved group of people. If there are producers that are able to certify to that, there's some additional benefits to having that certification. For example, for the ELAP program, instead of a 75% payment factor, it's a 90% payment factor, so they get a little bit more of that payment. So that's something that we discuss with the producers when they come in at the time of sign up. And then if anybody is interested on the back table, I did bring maps that are a list of where our offices are located, and then the contact information for those offices. Okay. Thank you, guys.
And save questions and transitioning. Jamie, will you be able to join us for our tour?
Yes.
Perfect. So we might do a lot of questions on the tour. So, you know.
And
All right. Our next speaker is going to be Dr. Olga Zakor, who's going to talk to us about the Venture Center offers and
Percent remote.
They're showing the same thing.
Yeah. So that's good. And.
yep, that one.
Yeah, certainly. I can go through here, Ron. Yes, just quickly because we're gonna have the tour, but I'd like to summarize some of what we have and also to give you an idea because we have processing going on our Cornell Convention Center today, so it might be a little loud in the facility. So just to start, indication here of the programs in the Department of Food Science where I am covers a lot of areas in terms of assistance to industry and assistance to entrepreneurs and people that are interested in some of the services or even applied research. Where the programs are AgriTech are the ones on the bottom part, which are in blue. So the Cornell Convention Center on top too, the Cornell Crop Beverage Institute, the High Pressure Processing Validation Center, and then we have the bioplant facilities in both locations. So I'll cover today mostly what we have here at Cornell AgriTech. So we have the Cornell Food Venture Center, which was established in 1980. So it's a very established program to support entrepreneurs. The Cornell Crop Beverage Institute that works with all our wineries and beer producers and also distilleries and kombucha estates across the state. The High Pressure Processing Validation Center, which is a unique facility that we have here, that you'll see it today too. And we have the national program for the Produce Safety Alliance, and that helps the farmers to comply with any of the federal regulations to ensure the safety of produce. An Institute for Food Safety at Cornell University that focus on ensuring through education and extension the safety of all the products, food products. So just in a very succinct way, we have industry support in terms of training, customized or standardized that is required by regulations. The testing and development facilities, you'll see some of that today here. We do have a unique service, which is called the Process Authority, in which we at Cornell act as experts on behalf of entrepreneurs and on behalf of farmers and producers that want to sell commercial products. So we will review the formulation and the product processing and create this document that is called a schedule process, which has a significance to file with federal agencies and state agencies. So there's sort of the green light for the regulators to be comfortable and for them to give you the license or to continue with the process. So the Cornell Food Venture Center has 3 people that act as processing authorities, myself, Dr. Bruno Xavier, and Elizabeth Sullivan. So we deal with many of these issues on a daily basis. And technical assistance, obviously, whatever we can do. And some of these assistantship is in the form of partnerships and collaborations with different programs. So the Cornell Food Venture Center, this is people that work in the group, Dr. Bruno Xavier and Elizabeth Sullivan in the back row, and then Shannon Rosella and Cynthia James that are part of our group. And so we were very busy. As you can see, last year we responded to over 8,000 requests for assistance from companies and entrepreneurs wanting to commercialize over close to 2,000 products. So we are working with about 600 different companies, entrepreneurs, entities to do this. And so you can see the coverage in New York State is all over the state. So we do this service through emails, through phone calls, through web, and whatever is necessary to provide assistance. We did a renovation of our facilities in 2018 with the support from the state of New York. We're very grateful for that. And we're able to renovate our pilot plant and invest in technologies that are appropriate. We're obviously focused on the safety and quality of these products that are gone through being a commodity to being more of a product that is identifiable and sold. And we have invested in what we call thermal and non-thermal processing technologies to make sure that we have all the options available for producers. And we work on new product and process development. These days, upcycling of byproducts is also important to us. And we have the capacity to start from the fresh product all the way to the packaged product, which is really a big advantage because it allows a producer to try different things and have at the end finished products that they can actually compare to see what is the best processing and route to get to the final product. We're inspected by FDA and by the Department of Agriculture and Markets. We're not inspected for dairy. That will be a facility in Ithaca that has the dairy inspection. And we're not inspected by USDA. So we're not a facility in which we can do meat products. That said, we can do anything when it's a development site. That's when you're looking at final products that might, you want to see if the market will accept those. There has to be an inspected facility. So we're inspected by Agri Markets and by FDA. We also have 3 people that are full-time with us. Roger Morse, our bioplant manager, to the right here, to the left, sorry, and then Bob and George. And that's a big advantage you have. So there's people that will work with the entrepreneurs when they come to our facility, and they can help you with whatever is needed. Preservation technologies that we have available vary quite a bit. But just to give you an idea for production, for example, of shelf-stable products, we have retorting in any type of container. We have aseptic processing and simulation. We have pasteurizers, sterilizers. We have extrusion technology, dehydration. So we can have different ways to dry the product to see what's the best quality or cost that will be available for your products. We also have baking capacity in concentration of liquids by evaporation or membrane filtration. And we have membrane filtration systems from reverse osmosis to microfiltration and homogenization and emulsification and so on. So this is our facility. We'll see it today. We also have a unique center. It's called the High Pressure Process Validation Center. And this is a commercial unit. This is the smallest commercial unit that you can have in the marketplace. It's a 50-liter capacity high pressure processor. It's a hyperbaric. And this is the technology that is used to preserve the foods, ensure their safety, have, let's say, extended refrigeration life for several months without applying heat. So what we do is apply very, very high levels of pressure, and that actually disrupts the permeability of the membranes of the pathogens that we want to treat against, and then they die, and therefore you have a safe product applying this technology. And there's for specific products, but we are one of the few universities that can do that. So we will get the products, we will inoculate with the pertinent pathogens, let's say Salmonella, E. coli, Listeria, and it will pass through the machine and see how many died, and then through the shelf life to make sure that they're actually dead and they're not injured and will grow over time. So these validation processes will follow FDA regulations, and we normally do like 20 or 30 products a month. And this is what has really expanded the market for guacamole that you can see in the marketplace that has several months of shelf life. Hummus, the same thing, and it hasn't been treated, so you maintain the fresh quality of the product. We also have partnerships that are very important for us. The New York State Center of Excellence for Food and Agriculture, one of the few centers in the state that receives state funding. And the idea with that is that we're going to help companies. We push new technologies to make sure that it's commercialized in New York State. We pull companies from outside to come in New York because of what we offer, and also provide support to grow those companies. And you can see the impact right there. Since the center started a few years ago, we have over 800 enterprises that have worked with the center, created a number of jobs, 924, increased the economic value for those, 32 million, including non-government funds that they're acquired by members that have worked with the Center of Excellence. And the economic impact is very, very substantial. So we work closely with the Center of Excellence to provide the business side. So we're technical, the Cornell Venture Center provides the technical expertise, and the Center of Excellence help with all the business and funding and all other requirements. One of the combined efforts between the Cornell Venture Center and the Center of Excellence is the establishment of this Food Innovation Lab. And that was open last year. It's a smaller scale area where entrepreneurs can work to develop the first ideas in a smaller scale before going into, let's say, a pilot plant, and also to have the capacity to do many trials without costing much money, and also to do the analysis right there. So, and with our experts right there, you can do this much more efficiently. And on the last initiatives we have is the fermentation farming lab that Dr. Xavier has led, because fermentation has become very important technology for some of the products, precision fermentation. And therefore, the lab is working with companies that want to really grow in this area. Just one indication that some of the online food science certificate programs that we have available include the food product development certificate that has also mentioned earlier, the crab Williams certificate, the winemaking certificate, and the hemp genetics and breeding certificate. And with that, I'll close in and ask for any options for questions after we have one more presenter.
Yeah, so
Okay.
unfortunately, Emily from Ag Markets was not able to join us today, but I can just give you a quick highlight of what she was going to present on. I think it might be of interest to many of you, but first, thank you, Olga. Ag Markets did present at our last two summit events, so we do already have that presentation recorded, but the big news is that through New York State Government Certified Program and Aquaculture Markets, there are a variety of grant opportunities that are soon to be open to those, largely those in the Government Certified Program. So if you're not familiar with or in it, there's some information on the back tables about the program as well as applications for becoming a Government Certified participant. But ultimately, these grants will be largely towards marketing, value-added product development, as well as infrastructure, right? So all the lacking capacity for processing that is throughout the state can potentially start to be addressed when these new grant opportunities come online. And they are supposed to be coming out this year, I believe. Was what we were told. So we'll share the presentations from Ag Markets with the details on those grants. You can also view them on previous recordings for our summit events, which will be available on the website. But unfortunately, Emily could not join us today. But with that, we're a little behind. So are there any burning questions for any of our panelists that you want to get out now? All of us will be on that tour, so we can definitely continue those discussions and answer those questions as well. No? All right, Eugene, I see you're talking. Go ahead, you can.
Well, I just don't know, is it gonna be easy to answer questions on the tour?
Well, it sounds like it'll be loud, so maybe get it out now.
Okay, I just have a quick one about that essay. So yeah, aquaculture is not like cows, pigs and chicken monoculture. We're very diverse and adding things all the time. And the list of fish you showed was pretty limited. Maybe that was a selected list, but you know, it was not many of the fish that are produced. So I was wondering how you add species to that, especially considering that you need to come up with some kind of references or standards or whatever. It's going to be different if there's only a few, and it actually can be very, it maybe could discourage new entries into development because they are going to inherently not have some of these reference points and maybe be ineligible. So I just have a general question about adding that. For example, my family has a sturgeon farm. I don't know, something like that, which is a little bit off the main track. Is what we'll do.
So our first part would be that it would have to fit the definition of an eligible species. So a sturgeon farm, what do you do with them?
It's food fish. It's-
Food fish, okay. Yep. So that would be an eligible use. And then from there, it's really just us putting together, you know, finding that local pricing information. And that can come from ads on websites, invoices that people have, things like that. And then mortality rates, I guess, would be kind of the bigger hurdle, but for that, I mean, we can talk to industry experts. But really, it's just putting that information together, making sure that it's sound, and then we send it down to Daphne and say, hey, we want to add this to eligible species. And, they review it and it's either a yay or a nay. I will say it's not hard as long as it meets the definition of an eligible species. So one of the things that we're working on in New York currently is, crayfish. Unfortunately, our only source of pricing information for crayfish is Louisiana. And the specialist in DC said there is no way a New York crayfish operation would have the same pricing as Louisiana. So we've been trying to find something that's reliable, and kind of backing our way into that. So if it's something completely outside the norm for the area, it might be a little bit harder. But you know, if it's something that a lot of people are producing, it's
We're receptive to that.
yes, yeah.
Do you think if we provided you with a list of what we know is being produced in New York, that could expedite the process?
Absolutely. Yes.
We can definitely help with that.
Awesome.
All right, any other pressing questions? All right, well, I want to thank our virtual participants. And before we jump into the tour, just remind people on the back table where you signed in, there are some evaluations. There's a QR code on them, if you'd rather do them digitally, you can do that right on your phone. But we do ask that you try and evaluate before you leave today, and give us some feedback so that we can continue to enhance our summit events over the years. But I'll pass it over, we'll have Olga lead us in our walk over to the Adventure Center, where we'll look at the tour. Again, thank you online participants, unfortunately.
Right, so, I think we probably should give them a 5-minute break, right? There is this, restroom right in on the one floor down. And then we can be right at the entrance of, Jordan Hall to walk to the other building.
Can we leave stuff here, or do we need to take it with us?
It's fine. We're gonna come back here, so don't run off. If you want food, it's gonna be back here right after the tour. Right?
You want
And if you want a snack to go, there's some stuff out already and drinks and some coffee if you need to pick up. I'm gonna leave mine, so I think we can shut.
I'm
I think you have to do it.
All right.
I made myself co-host, but it doesn't. Live.
We still have, I think.